Understand how a family therapy session turned into 8 years of gunfire, we have to go back to 1754, when Britain and France had a disagreement over who owned a forest that neither of them had ever visited. This was the 7 Years' War. It lasted 9 years, because history is not required to make sense. I won! I have Canada! You have my whole Canada! Also, I'm broke. Britain's national debt had doubled. Someone had to pay for it, and Parliament looked across the Atlantic at 13 colonies that had been left almost completely alone for 150 years, quietly getting used to running themselves. Good news! You're going to help with the bill. Sorry, who are you? We're your government. We have a government. It meets on Tuesdays. Gary runs it. In 1765 came the Stamp Act, a tax on every printed thing in the colonies. Newspapers, contracts, playing cards. If it was paper, it was taxed. Parliament had accidentally taxed the two loudest professions in America, lawyers and journalists. This is tyranny! And I will be writing about it, at length, with a very unflattering drawing. Mobs formed. Tax collectors were tarred and feathered, which sounds cartoonish until you learn the tar was hot. I'd like to resign. You haven't started yet! I'd like to resign harder. The colonists had a slogan, no taxation without representation. Parliament had a rebuttal, virtual representation. The idea that Parliament represented every British subject everywhere, whether or not they'd ever heard of you. So you represent me? Passionately. What's my name? Colonist. Britain caved and repealed the Stamp Act, then immediately passed the Declaratory Act, announcing it could tax the colonies whenever it liked. This is the political equivalent of apologizing while maintaining eye contact. Then came the Townshend Acts, more boycotts. So in 1768, Britain shipped soldiers into Boston to keep order, which is a bit like putting out a fire with a second, angrier fire. March, 1770. A crowd surrounds a handful of British soldiers, throwing snowballs, ice, and insults. Someone gets knocked down. A gun goes off. Then several. 5 colonists die. Paul Revere, silversmith and part-time propagandist, produced an engraving of the event that was accurate in the way a movie poster is accurate. In my version, the officer is ordering them to fire. Did he? In my version, the soldiers went to trial and were defended by a Boston lawyer named John Adams, who got most of them acquitted, because he believed everyone deserved a fair trial, and because he'd later be extremely useful to the revolution as a man who could not be called a mob. I have defended the enemy. My reputation is destroyed. He became president. 1773, the Tea Act. And here's the part everyone gets wrong. It made tea cheaper. Britain was bailing out the East India Company by letting it undercut the smugglers. They're making tea affordable, those monsters. But cheap tea was still taxed tea, and buying it meant admitting Parliament had the right to tax you. So on the night of December 16th, roughly 100 men, thinly disguised as Mohawk warriors, and I mean thinly. How do I look? Like Steve. Perfect. Boarded 3 ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. About 10,000 pounds worth. Then they swept the decks, because they were vandals with standards. Britain's response was the coercive acts. Boston Harbor, closed. Massachusetts government, suspended. And everyone else's reaction, they can just do that? To Boston today. Should we all get together and talk about this? And that is how you accidentally invent the Continental Congress. April 18, 1775. British troops march to seize colonial weapons at Concord. Paul Revere rides out to warn everyone. And he did not shout, "The British are coming." Partly because everyone there was British, and partly because it was a secret mission and he was trying not to be heard. The regulars are coming out. Pass it on. He was also captured halfway through. The ride was finished by a doctor named Samuel Prescott, who got none of the poems. At dawn on Lexington Green, 77 militiamen face 700 regulars. Someone fires. Nobody knows who. 8 colonists die. The British march on to Concord, find almost nothing, and then have to walk 18 miles back to Boston, while every farmer in Massachusetts shoots at them from behind a wall. Where are they? Behind the wall, sir. Which wall? The war had started, and nobody had officially declared one. June 1775. The Battle of Bunker Hill, fought gloriously on Breed's Hill. The British took the position on the third try and lost over 1,000 men doing it. We won! We have half an army left, sir. We won. Thinly. Congress appointed a Virginia planter named George Washington to command, largely because he was tall, calm, from the South, and the only man who showed up to a political meeting in a military uniform. I'm not saying anything. I'm just standing here. You're hired. Congress still sent King George a peace offer, the Olive Branch Petition, begging for reconciliation. He refused to read it and declared them rebels. Then, in January 1776, Thomas Paine published Common Sense, a pamphlet arguing that hereditary monarchy was absurd, and it sold like nothing in American history. They're saying kings are ridiculous. Yes, Majesty. Well, prove them wrong by burning a coastal town. Sire. On July 2, 1776, Congress voted for independence. On July 4th, they approved the document explaining why, mostly written by Thomas Jefferson, then heavily edited by everyone else. Which is every writer's nightmare. You cut a quarter of it. We improved a quarter of it. Jefferson quietly seethed about this for 40 years. Channel 4. Then Washington's army promptly got demolished in New York, lost the city, and retreated across New Jersey for months, shrinking the whole way. By December, he had a few thousand freezing men and enlistments expiring on New Year's Day. So on Christmas night, he loaded them into boats, crossed an icy river in a storm, marched 9 miles, and hit the Hessian garrison at Trenton at dawn. Total victory. Then he did it again at Princeton. I lose most battles. Yes, sir. But I escape magnificently. October 1777. A British army under General Burgoyne marches down from Canada, gets surrounded near Saratoga, and surrenders. Nearly 6,000 men. Which brings us to Paris, where a 70-year-old Benjamin Franklin had been sent to charm France into joining, and had solved this by wearing a fur cap and pretending to be a rustic frontier philosopher. I am but a simple woodsman. He's so authentic. I invented bifocals. Oh. After Saratoga proved the Americans could actually win, France signed on in 1778. Then Spain. Then the Dutch. What began as a tax dispute in Boston was now a global war Britain was fighting on 4 continents. Do I care deeply about American liberty? Do you? I care deeply about Britain being sad. Meanwhile, the Continental Army spent the winter at Valley Forge, where roughly 2,000 men died of disease and exposure, and where a Prussian officer named von Steuben turned them into actual soldiers by drilling them relentlessly while swearing in German and French using a translator. For the swearing. Ah! He says your formation is bad. Ah! He says it is bad in a way he did not know was possible. Stuck in the north, Britain switched south, taking Charleston and crushing the Americans at Camden. But General Nathaniel Greene ran a campaign of losing intelligently, retreating, stretching British supply lines, bleeding Cornwallis at Cowpens and Guilford Courthouse. We fight, we get beat, we rise and fight again. I have won every battle, and we have 400 men left, sir. I'd like to win fewer battles. Cornwallis pulled back to a port town called Yorktown to resupply by sea. Reasonable. Assuming you control the sea. He did not. A French fleet under de Grasse sealed off the Chesapeake, while Washington and the French army marched 400 miles south, faster than anyone thought possible. The Navy will come. The Navy is French, sir. Whose Navy is French? The Navy. Surrounded by land and sea, Cornwallis surrendered on October 19, 1781. He claimed to be ill and sent a subordinate to hand over his sword. Because losing is hard, and being seen losing is harder. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. Britain recognized the United States, and Washington did the single strangest thing any victorious general has ever done. He handed back his commission and went home to farm. He gave up power? Voluntarily? So they say, Majesty. Then he is the greatest man in the world. I hate him so much. So, how are we feeling now? Independent. He's independent. We've accepted it. We've grown. I still have your language, your legal system, and your parliamentary procedure. Then what exactly did you change? The T. Same time next century?